It was a normal day. I thought I was helping my daughter. Little did I know that my generosity would be her opportunity to get rid of me and everything I hold dear. She replaced all my things with cheap copies, as if my life were just a set of furniture that could be thrown away. But she didn't know that I had a plan too, and my plan led to an end she could have never imagined. I've always prided myself on my quiet, unyielding resilience. It's a quality that carried me through 5 decades, a turbulent and ultimately hollow marriage, and the chaotic, sacrificing years of raising a daughter who, for all her external charm, was a perpetual whirlwind that seemed to sweep up everything in her path, leaving me to pick up the pieces. This quiet strength, I believed, allowed me to face life's many indignities with a polite smile and a discreetly raised eyebrow, rather than a clenched fist. But dignity, as I've recently discovered, is a luxury, a fragile shield that can be shattered by a single, calculated act of cruelty. It doesn't pay the bills, and it certainly won't protect you from the kind of insidious betrayal that can only come from a person you've loved, nurtured, and given your entire life to. My daughter, Jessica, was my whole world, the very reason I woke up every morning. She was the driving force behind every frugal choice I made, every coupon I clipped, every overtime hour I worked as a bookkeeper. My life was a testament to one simple rule: never look back, only forward, toward a brighter, more secure future for my child, regardless of how shadowed my own past had become. I clung to a naive belief that the unwavering kindness and sacrifice you pour into your own flesh and blood will one day return to you, if not in kind, then at least in a quiet, shared understanding. It seems that was my most profound mistake, my greatest and most unforgivable act of self-delusion. That's why, when she called me last month, her voice a trembling, desperate thing and her words a torrent of manufactured panic, I didn't hesitate for a single second. I was in my kitchen, the warm, comforting scent of my famous apple pie filling the air, a pie I had been meticulously preparing for her and the grandchildren, when the phone rang. "Mom, please, I don't know what to do," she sobbed into the receiver, the sound echoing in the sudden silence of my home. "The kids are outgrowing the house, and the bank won't approve the loan for the extension. We've tried everything, Mom, every single thing, and they just keep telling us no. I've been crying all morning. I feel so helpless. I can't bear to see my children crammed into that small space, feeling like they don't have room to grow." The line went silent, punctuated only by her theatrical sniffles and the shallow, dramatic intakes of breath I knew so well from her childhood performances. I feel like such a complete and utter failure. Now, you have to understand, Jessica has always had a flair for the dramatic, a talent she honed from a young age. A scraped knee was not just a scrape. It was a near-fatal injury that required a full-blown medical team and my undivided attention. A C on a school report was not merely a C. It was the catastrophic end of her academic career. But this time, it felt different. Her failure wasn't just a bruised ego. It was a matter of her children's happiness, my sweet little angels. And in my book, that was a non-negotiable, a sacred duty. The thought of my grandchildren feeling cramped and unhappy in their own home was simply unbearable, an image that felt like a physical blow to my gut. So I did what any mother, any real mother, would do. I took a deep, steadying breath, picturing her tear-streaked face. "Sweetheart, you listen to me," I said, my voice as steady and comforting as I could make it. "You don't worry about a thing, not a single thing. I'll help you. I'll make sure your kids have all the room they need." The solution seemed simple, at least on paper, and in my hopelessly optimistic heart. I had a small inheritance from my late sister, a perfectly tidy sum that I had been saving for a rainy day, or more accurately, for my own comfortable retirement. It was my nest egg, my ticket to a peaceful old age, free from the kind of financial worries that had shadowed my entire adult life. But the sight of Jessica so distraught was greater an ache than any fear of my own future. My own comfort, my own peace of mind, paled in comparison to the imagined suffering of my grandchildren. So, with a heart swelling with maternal pride, I wrote a check, a substantial one. It was a heroic act, in my mind, a selfless, unconditional sacrifice for the sake of family. As I filled out the check, the numbers seemed to hum with the promise of financial freedom for a woman who had spent her entire life clipping coupons and looking for bargains. It was the bulk of my savings, a fact I deliberately and carefully neglected to mention to Jessica. "Don't you dare pay me back, honey," I told her with a forced, breathless laugh. "Just consider it a gift from your old mom." She thanked me profusely, her voice now a bubbly, cheerful sound, promising to invite me over for dinner once the construction was finished. She even gave me a little special key to their house, a small decorative trinket with a tiny heart on the end, a symbol of our unbreakable bond. "You're always welcome, Mom," she said, her voice dripping with syrupy sweetness. "This is a little something to show you that this is your home, too." I was so moved by the gesture, so completely and utterly taken in, that I didn't even question the oddity of a key to a house I didn't own. I was so caught up in the moment, blinded by the perceived act of love, that I didn't see the crimson flags flaying frantically in the periphery. I only saw my daughter, my whole world, happy again. That feeling of selfless satisfaction was my last taste of true, uncomplicated peace. A few days later, a strange, creeping unease settled in my stomach. I was running some errands and, as a matter of routine, found myself driving past Jessica's house. I noticed an unfamiliar van in her driveway, a grubby, unmarked vehicle with a logo that looked like it had been drawn by a 6-year-old on a napkin. It was a strange, unprofessional thing. The two burly men were moving furniture out of the house, not in. They were not builders. They were movers. A cold prickle of unease, sharp and insistent, began to spread across my skin. I quickly dialed her number, but it went straight to voicemail, which was unusual for her. The silence was deafening. I drove to the house and used the little key she had given me. It slid into the lock, clicked, and I pushed the door open to a scene that would forever be seared in my memory, a tableau of cold-blooded betrayal. I saw her in the living room, gesturing to the men. She was dressed in new clothes, a sleek, tailored pantsuit that was far too expensive for a woman who had supposedly been on the brink of financial ruin. She was laughing, a bright, bubbly sound that was a sickening counterpoint to her tearful phone call. She hadn't seen me yet. One of the men was struggling with my cherished grandfather clock, the one that had chimed the hours in my home for 40 years. I watched, horrified, as he scraped it against the wall, leaving a long, ugly gouge on the plaster. Beside it, another man was wrestling with my Persian rug, a precious wedding gift from my late husband. He was dragging it across the polished hardwood floor, gathering a mess of dirt and grime, and my heart seized in my chest. What in the world was going on? Then I saw them piled in a heap in the hallway, waiting to be moved out. Replicas. The grandfather clock was a particle board knockoff. The bookshelf was made of flimsy veneer, and the Persian rug was a pathetic-looking machine-made copy. The truth hit me like a physical blow, a ton of bricks to the gut. My daughter wasn't struggling. She was replacing my things with cheap, ugly substitutes. And she had taken the originals. She had used my money, my retirement money, to finance the theft of my own possessions, replacing them with glorified junk. The phone call, the tears, the desperate plea, it was all a scam. A carefully orchestrated, cruel, and absolutely disgusting scam. I stood in the doorway, my mouth agape, my mind reeling. The air felt thick with deception, and I could feel my quiet, unyielding dignity cracking, piece by piece, like an old porcelain doll. As a side note, if you're enjoying this story, please consider subscribing to our channel and hitting the notification bell. It means the world to me and helps me keep sharing these stories of survival and perseverance. Thank you. I stood there, a frozen statue in my own doorway, my mouth agape and my mind a shattered mosaic of disbelief and seething, visceral rage. The world, which just a moment ago was a beacon of maternal pride and selfless sacrifice, had become a dark and twisted caricature of itself. The cheerful yellow walls of Jessica's living room seemed to mock me, and the sunlight streaming through the windows felt like a cruel spotlight, illuminating the scene of my complete and utter humiliation. I could feel the blood rushing to my head, a hot, prickling sensation that felt like 1,000 tiny needles. My dignity, that precious, quiet thing I had always relied upon, was not just gone. It had been systematically dismantled and replaced with a sickening sense of shame. Shame at being so foolish, so easily duped, and shame at the thought that my own daughter was capable of such a monstrous, cold-blooded act. Jessica, still blissfully oblivious to my presence, was now directing the men to a large wooden crate. "And be careful with that one," she chirped, her voice as light and airy as a feather. "It's a very expensive piece from a local artisan. It's for my mother-in-law, a special gift." My mother-in-law? A gift? My blood ran cold, a freezing sensation that snaked its way down my spine. The crate was marked with a familiar handwriting, mine. It was filled with my cherished collection of teacups, each one with a story, then a memory attached. I had spent years curating them, searching for them in dusty antique shops and at flea markets across the country. And now they were being treated like so much junk. The men grunted and heaved, and I heard a sickening cracking sound as one of the porcelain handles snapped. It was then that she turned and saw me. Her face, which had been a mask of cheerful avarice, froze instantly. The smile vanished, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated horror. Her eyes, wide and panicked, darted around the room as if looking for an escape route, a place to hide from the terrible reality of the situation. "Mom," she yelped, her voice a pathetic imitation of the sweet, innocent tone she used when she wanted something from me. What are you doing here? I thought you were at the grocery store. I thought you were supposed to be out." "I was," I said, my voice barely a whisper, thick with disbelief and a building, suffocating sense of dread. "I saw the van, and I got worried. I came to see if everything was okay." The words were an ironic punchline to a joke I didn't want to be a part of. Everything was not okay, not by a long shot. The air was heavy with the stench of her lies, a foul, nauseating scent that made my stomach churn. Her hands, which a moment ago had been gesturing imperiously, were now wringing nervously in front of her. "Oh, Mom, you don't understand. It's a surprise." A surprise? The gall, the sheer, absolute, unmitigated audacity of this woman. My own daughter, who I had practically bled for, was standing in my living room, surrounded by my stolen life and a house full of cheap knockoffs, and calling it a surprise. I wanted to laugh, or scream, or both. The absurdity of it all was so profound, so utterly ridiculous, that for a moment I actually felt a bubble of hysterical laughter rising in my throat. "A surprise, honey," I said, my voice as cold and sharp as a shard of glass. I gestured to the flimsy replicas, replacing my heirlooms with this garbage. I took a step closer, my eyes fixed on hers. "And you have the nerve to tell me you were just in a tough spot? You were crying, Jessica. You were crying about not being able to afford a home extension. And all this time, you were planning to steal from your own mother?" My voice was rising now, each word a venomous arrow aimed directly at her heart. Her face crumpled, but it wasn't with shame or remorse. It was with a strange, entitled resentment, a look that said, "You've caught me and now you're ruining everything. You just
don't get it, Mom, she whined, her voice a pathetic whine that I knew all too well from her teenage years. These things are old. They're dated. They don't match the new aesthetic we're going for. This is what everyone is doing. It's just a new trend. I was doing you a favor, honestly. They'll be worth more when they're vintage anyway. I was just trying to help you. And it's not like you were ever going to sell them. You don't even need them, Mom. You just have them sitting there, collecting dust. A favor? The nerve. She was doing me a favor by taking my life's possessions and selling them, leaving me with a home full of glorified trash. Her complete lack of empathy, her stunning inability to see the wrong in what she was doing was more painful than the theft itself. It was as if I was talking to a stranger, a cruel, soulless robot who had been programmed to mimic my daughter's face and voice. A favor? I repeated, my voice now a low, dangerous whisper. Jessica, you used my savings, my hard-earned savings, to pay for this little home makeover. This isn't just about the furniture, honey. It's about a $50,000 check I wrote you, a check I thought was going to help you build a new future for your family, a check I wrote because I love you. And all this time, you were just taking from me, using me, treating me like I was a fool? She sighed, a dramatic, long-suffering sound that I knew all too well from her teenage years. It's not like that, Mom. It's a loan. We'll pay you back eventually. We were just trying to get the new look settled first. We were going to tell you later, when everything was perfect. A loan? When she hadn't even mentioned the furniture or the fact that she had my key made to break into my home. The lies were coming so easily now, so effortlessly, that it was terrifying. It was clear that this was not a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was a carefully plotted scheme, a meticulous act of deception. The realization was a sickening thud in my gut. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a calculated, cold-blooded betrayal. And the worst part was the casualness of it all. The way she was standing there trying to justify her actions as if I was the one overreacting. As if it was perfectly normal to replace your mother's cherished belongings with cheap fakes and steal her life savings in the process. I turned and walked out of the house, leaving her and her grimy accomplices standing in the wreckage of my trust. The air felt thick with deception, and my heart was heavy with a sorrow that was deeper than I had ever known. I didn't say another word. There was nothing left to say. What happened next changed my life forever. I had no idea what was in store, and you won't want to miss it. Stay tuned to find out what I did in response to this betrayal and how it completely turned the tables on my own daughter and her family. I was still so foolishly unaware that this was just the beginning of her plan, the first domino in a chain of events that would leave me fighting for my very independence. Would I be able to fight back against this kind of calculated evil? Or was she already one step ahead of me? I was about to find out. And I was about to discover just how far she was willing to go.
My car ride home was an agonizing blur of righteous indignation and stomach-churning nausea. The world outside my window, with its meticulously manicured lawns and cheerfully painted picket fences, seemed like a cruel joke, a taunting reminder of a normalcy I no longer possessed. I felt as though I was driving through a foreign land, a place where the unspoken rules of decency, love, and filial piety simply didn't apply. I, Martha Miller, a woman who had given away her hard-earned money and her most treasured possessions to her own flesh and blood, was a fool, a naive, foolish old woman. And for what? For a flimsy promise of gratitude and a house full of cheap knockoffs? My dignity, that quiet, steady thing I had always relied on, was not just gone. It had been replaced by a gnawing, festering sense of shame. Shame at being so easily duped, at having a daughter who was capable of such a thing. It was a shame so profound it felt like a physical weight on my chest, an ache that was 1,000 times worse than the betrayal itself. As I pulled into my driveway, the house looked different, smaller somehow. The front door, usually a comforting, cheerful shade of blue, seemed to mock me with its passive, unblinking face. It was as if I was seeing everything for the very first time, stripped of the warm, comforting familiarity I had grown to love over the decades. I pushed the door open,
the old wood groaning in protest. And the scene that greeted me was even more gut-wrenching than I had imagined. The space where my grandmother's antique bookshelf had stood for 40 years was now empty, a stark rectangular patch of pale paint on the wall where the sun had never reached. The living room, which had always been a cozy sanctuary filled with books and family pictures, felt cold and hollow, the air thick with the sickly sweet smell of cheap particle board and desperation. My cherished Persian rug, which had once warmed the room with its vibrant, intricate patterns, was replaced by a dull machine-made thing that looked like it had been bought at a discount store, a pathetic, soulless imitation that was a physical manifestation of the kind of woman my daughter had become. I walked through the rooms, each one a fresh assault on my senses, a monument to her greed. My antique chest of drawers, a treasured wedding present from my late husband's parents, was gone. In its place was a flimsy particle board dresser with cheap metal handles that looked like they would snap off at the first tug. My grandmother's rocking chair, where I had rocked Jessica to sleep countless times, was replaced by a sterile, modern-looking thing with no character whatsoever. It was as if she had not just replaced my possessions, but had attempted to erase my memories, to wipe out the very essence of my home. My life's history, piece by piece, was being systematically dismantled by the person I had built it for. I felt a hot prickling sensation behind my eyes. I was too old for this. I was too tired for this. I had spent my entire life building a home, a life, and a family, only to have it all torn down by the very person I had built it for. I sat on the edge of the bed, the cheap, ugly bed that had replaced my cherished heirloom four-poster, and stared at the mess she had made. My stomach churned. It wasn't just the furniture. It was the audacity of it all, the complete and utter disregard for my feelings, for our shared history, the casual way she had stolen from me as if she were merely borrowing a cup of sugar. I picked up the phone, my hand trembling, and dialed her number. It went straight to voicemail. "You've reached Jessica. Leave a message." I hung up without a word. What do you say to a daughter who has betrayed you so completely? What words could possibly convey the depth of my sorrow and rage? I tried calling my son-in-law, Mark. He was a quiet, unassuming man, a little mousy around Jessica, but I had always thought he had a good heart. He didn't answer either. I was alone. A wave of despair, cold and heavy, washed over me. I wanted to lie down and cry, to curl up in a ball and make the world disappear. But I couldn't. Something inside me, a tiny ember of defiance, a small, stubborn voice in the back of my mind that sounded suspiciously like my own mother's, refused to let me give up. My mother always said, "A lady never complains, but she always gets her way." Well, I wasn't complaining. I was just considering my options. And my options at that moment seemed to be few and far between. I decided to get a glass of water, the only way I could think to calm the chaos in my mind. I walked into the kitchen, the floorboards groaning under my feet, and that's when I saw it. A letter sitting on the kitchen counter next to the pathetic, cheap-looking toaster that had replaced my old one. It was a formal-looking envelope with the name of a law firm embossed in it on a cold black font. My name was typed on the front, sharp and impersonal. I picked it up with a trembling hand, my heart thumping against my ribs, a cold, hard drumbeat of dread. I tore it open, and the words swam before my eyes at first, a blur of legal jargon and intimidating language. But then a few phrases jumped out at me, sharp and clear as a bell, each one a hammer bell to my fragile sense of reality. Notice of impending legal action, transfer of property, power of attorney. My blood ran cold, a freezing liquid in my veins. The letter was a formal notice from Jessica's lawyers. It stated that she, in her capacity as my primary caregiver, was taking legal steps to assume full control over my financial and personal affairs, citing my increasing forgetfulness and questionable financial decisions. My questionable financial decisions were giving her $50,000. The sheer irony of it all was almost enough to make me laugh. Almost. But the anger was a bitter, searing taste in my mouth, drowning out any hint of humor. This was more than theft. This was an attempt to erase me completely. This wasn't just about the furniture. This was a war.
And I wasn't going to lie down and surrender. What if they've already sold my heirlooms? I need to get my hands on that money. How do I even begin to fight a legal battle against my own daughter? Everything is at stake, and I have nothing left to lose. I am so close to the truth, and I know this is a story you'll want to see to the end.
The letter was a masterpiece of cold, corporate cruelty. A legal document so exquisitely crafted in its rise that it was almost beautiful in its malice. It spoke in sterile, professional prose of my increasing forgetfulness and a series of questionable financial decisions. My questionable financial decisions, of course, were giving my only daughter $50,000. The sheer irony of it all was so profound, it was almost enough to make me laugh. Almost. But the anger was a bitter, searing taste in my mouth, drowning out any hint of humor. How could she? How could my own daughter, the child I had raised with such love and care, who I had sacrificed everything for, do this? It was one thing to steal from me, but to claim I was incompetent? To use my love against me as a legal weapon? That was a betrayal so profound, it went beyond the realm of normal human behavior. It was something monstrous. It felt like a punch to the gut, a deliberate, malicious blow that was meant to knock the very breath out of me. I reread the letter, my hands shaking so violently the paper rattled. The document claimed she had been my primary caregiver for months, a fact that was a complete and utter fabrication. She lived an hour away, and the last time she had even cooked me dinner was for my birthday 2 years ago. The lawyer's words seemed to mock me with every line, a list of supposed failings I had never even committed. They were building a case against me, a legal foundation for their lies, and I was all alone in my hollow, empty house, with nothing but a house full of flimsy furniture and a heart full of sorrow. I felt a wave of despair so heavy, so suffocating, that for a moment I thought I might drown in it. I had no witnesses. I had no proof of the theft. I had a daughter who was a master of deception and a son-in-law who was either a willing accomplice or a pathetic coward. I tried calling Mark again, my son-in-law. This time, to my surprise, he picked up. His voice was guarded, a little too formal, and I knew instantly that something was terribly wrong. His tone, so different from the casual kindness he had always shown me, was a testament to his complicity. "Hello, Martha," he said, and the way he said my name, with a hint of distance and a note of forced politeness, was a slap in the face. It felt as if he was talking to a stranger, not to his wife's mother. I felt a cold knot of dread tighten in my stomach. "Mark," I said, my voice trembling. "What is going on? What is Jessica doing? She sent me a letter. What is this about?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear him breathing, the sound of his sharp intake of air, as if he was preparing for a lecture he didn't want to give. He was choosing his words carefully, trying to find a way to justify his wife's monstrous actions. I could almost hear the rehearsed speech in his head, the pathetic excuses he was trying to concoct. "Martha, listen," he finally said, his voice low and apologetic, but with no real apology behind it. "Jessica is just worried about you. She wants what's best for you. She's just trying to help." "Best for me?" I practically screamed into the phone, the rage finally bubbling to the surface, a hot, uncontrollable geyser of fury. "Best for me is having her steal my furniture and my money and then try to have me declared incompetent?
Mark, this is not about what's best for me. This is a complete and utter fraud. You know this isn't right. You can't just stand by and let her do this to me. He sighed, a tired, defeated sound. Jessica just thinks you need help managing your finances, he said. She's just trying to protect your assets. She doesn't think you're capable of handling them on your own. The words were like a dagger to the heart. He was trying to gaslight me, to make me believe her monstrous actions were acts of love and concern. Protect my assets? The assets she just stole? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The absurdity of it was so great, it was beyond anything I could have ever imagined. I was living in a bad movie, a bizarre low-budget melodrama with a terrible script. Mark, I said, my voice dropping to a low and dangerous whisper, you know this isn't right. You know what she's doing. You can't just stand by and let her do this to me. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, a silence filled with his cowardice and my despair. Martha, I'm sorry, he said. There's nothing I can do. She's my wife. He hung up, just like that. The silence that followed was deafening. My son-in-law, the man I had always thought was a decent person, had just chosen his conniving, cruel wife over me, a helpless old woman. He had chosen money and a life of comfort over decency and loyalty. I was a good person. I had always tried to do the right thing. I had sacrificed so much for my daughter and her family. But now I was standing in a house full of junk, with a legal document that was trying to take away my life, with a daughter who had betrayed me and a son-in-law who had abandoned me. It felt like a slap in the face, a cold, hard dose of reality. I was alone in this battle, and it was just getting started. I couldn't help but wonder, was I really losing my mind? Or was this whole twisted scheme just an elaborate gaslighting from the very people who were supposed to love me? I had to find out. I had to fight back. I was a fighter. I wasn't going to let them win. This was not over. I'm so close to the truth, and I know this is a story you'll want to see to the end. I had a lot of questions, but I was about to get a lot of answers. Everything is at stake, and I have nothing left to lose. I have to find a way to fight back, a way to prove that I am not crazy. What if they've already sold my heirlooms? I need to get my hands on that money. How do I even begin to fight a legal battle against my own daughter? Everything is at stake, and I have nothing left to lose. I am about to make a call that will change everything.
That night, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. My mind was a feverish whirlwind, a chaotic storm of rage, despair, and a cold, hard determination I hadn't known I possessed. The hours bled into one another, marked only by the persistent, unblinking glare of the cheap synthetic fibers of the new rug scratching at my bare feet as I paced the length of the living room. The house felt alien, a sterile, hollow shell of its former self. I couldn't escape the suffocating feeling that I was trapped in someone else's life, a bizarre, twisted version of my own reality. My own daughter, the child I had raised with every ounce of my love, was trying to have me legally declared incompetent and steal everything I had worked for. It was a betrayal so profound, so heinous, that it ignited a fierce, burning anger that was 1,000 times more potent than any sorrow. My mother, God rest her soul, always said, when they hit you below the belt, that's when you know you're fighting for your life. I was fighting for my life, and I was going to fight dirty. My quiet dignity was gone, shattered by a legal document and a house full of junk. Now all I had was a righteous fury that was a fire in my veins. I went online, my hand shaking so hard I could barely type into the search bar.
How to fight a power of attorney claim, I typed, the words appearing in a jagged, trembling line on the screen. The results were a dizzying maze of legal jargon, dire warnings, and grim statistics about elder abuse. The internet, it turned out, was a cold, unforgiving place. I learned that getting a power of attorney rescinded was incredibly difficult, especially if the person claiming it had a fabricated case built on lies and manipulation. I was in a bad spot, a very bad spot. I had no witnesses. I had no proof that the money had been stolen, and I certainly had no proof that she'd replaced all my furniture. And I had a daughter who was a master of deception and a son-in-law who was either a willing accomplice or a pathetic coward. My options, I realized, were few and far between. I had to be smart. I had to think like her. She had used my love and trust against me, so I would have to use her weaknesses against her. I knew she was a creature of habit. She always had her coffee at the same time at the same coffee shop. She went to the same gym every morning. She shopped at the same ridiculously expensive boutique on Wednesdays. She was also incredibly vain and image conscious. The thought of being exposed, of having her perfect little life shattered, was a fear that was probably more powerful than her love for her own family. She valued appearances over everything, a fact I had learned the hard way. The thought, as cold and sharp as a shard of glass, pierced my mind. What if she had used my money to pay for something personal, something that would be impossible to trace? I remembered a conversation we'd had a few weeks ago when she had just casually mentioned a new clinic she was going to, a place that specialized in cosmetic surgery, a place with a reputation for being discreet and, more importantly, brutally expensive. At the time, I had just laughed it off, thinking it was just a passing thought. But now, it was the only lead I had. It was a long shot, a desperate last-ditch effort, but it was the only one I had. I put on my best clothes, a simple but elegant dress that my husband had always loved, and a pair of comfortable flats. I wasn't going to look like a confused, senile old woman. I was going to look like a woman who knew exactly what she was doing. The next morning, I drove to the clinic. It was a sleek, modern building with tinted windows and a discreet sign that was barely visible from the street. It was the kind of place you went to if you had something to hide. I parked my car and walked inside, my heart pounding in my chest like a frightened bird. The receptionist was a young woman with a face that looked like it had been surgically enhanced to look perpetually bored. She sat behind a pristine white desk, her fingers flies across a keyboard. She didn't even look up as I approached. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice a monotone. I took a deep breath, preparing to put on the performance of a lifetime. "I'm Martha," I said, trying to sound as confident and as harmless as possible. "I'm here to pick up some files for my daughter Jessica. She had an appointment last week, and she wanted me to pick up her records for her. She told me she had a procedure, a small one, I think. She's been so secretive lately, and I wanted to see if everything was okay. She hasn't been herself." I was winging it, but I had a good feeling. The receptionist finally looked up, her eyes narrowing. "Ma'am, we can't release patient information without a signed consent form," she said, her voice flat and unyielding. My heart sunk. I had walked into a dead end. I felt a wave of despair so heavy, so suffocating that for a moment I thought I might faint. But then I remembered my mother's voice, and I remembered Jessica's betrayal. The rage, the cold, hard fury returned, and I knew what I had to do. I had to become the very thing they were trying to label me as. I had to become the helpless, senile old woman. I took a deep, shaky breath, and two lonely, pathetic tears rolled down my cheeks. The receptionist's face softened, just a little. She saw the tears, and her eyes, which a moment ago had been as hard as stone, now held a hint of something that looked suspiciously like pity. She's worried about your mind, she said, her voice now a bit more sympathetic. That's why you're here? I nodded, a single lonely tear rolling down my cheek, a silent testament to my manufactured grief. She says I'm becoming a burden, I said, my voice barely a whisper, a trembling, fragile sound that was a perfect imitation of a woman on the verge of a breakdown, and I don't know what to believe anymore. She said she was coming here to help herself, but she's so secretive now. I'm so confused. One minute she's crying about not being able to afford a home extension, and the next she's talking about some new expensive procedure. And she said her friend paid for it. I don't understand. I was laying it on thick, but I had to give it a shot. I was a helpless old lady after all. What was the harm in a little lie? Ma'am, I understand your concern, she said, her voice now filled with a strange kind of pity. But I can't give you any information. It's against policy. However, I can tell you that we have many clients who are concerned about their family members. We have a lot of clients who are paying for their loved ones' procedures. It's a common thing. Some families just have a lot of assets. They just want to make sure their loved ones are taken care of, and that their loved ones don't spend all their money on questionable things. I knew what she was doing. She was giving me a hint. She couldn't tell me what I wanted to know, but she was telling me exactly what I already knew. The money had been spent. My money had been used to pay for Jessica's expensive, vain little treatments. The rage returned, a cold, hard knot in my stomach. So that was it. My daughter, the woman who had cried about her children's happiness, had used my money to pay for her own vanity. She was a monster, a cruel, cold-blooded thief who had no conscience whatsoever. My heart, which a moment ago had been a frantic, frightened bird, was now a cold, hard stone. I drove home, my mind spinning. I had my answer. She had spent the money. But the question was, how do I prove it, and how do I get it back? I was still at a dead end, but now I had a new, more horrifying truth to contend with. My daughter was not just a liar and a thief. She was a narcissist who saw me as nothing more than a bank account, a means to an end. And I had to make her pay. I had to expose her for the monster she was. My thoughts were a jumble of anger and a growing dangerous sense of purpose. My phone rang, and I glanced at the screen. It was Jessica. I ignored the call. Then she called again, and again. She left a voicemail, her voice sounding irritated and impatient. Mom, pick up. Where are you? I need you to sign some papers. It's important. The papers she was referring to, I knew, were the power of attorney forms. She was still trying to get my signature, trying to make her control over me official. I deleted the voicemail. The game had changed. I wasn't going to be a victim anymore. I was going to be a predator, a vengeful, righteous predator. I needed help, and I knew just the person to call. My old friend, Helen, a retired legal aide who had always had a soft spot for me. Helen had been through her own battles with family and knew a thing or two about the law, even if she wasn't a lawyer herself. She was a pragmatist, a woman who believed in cold, hard facts. I had to be careful with my words, though. I didn't want to sound crazy. Helen? I said when she answered. I need your advice. I think my daughter has stolen from me. Helen's voice was sharp and clear. What did she take? She asked, her voice calm and steady. Oh, Helen, you won't believe what happened. You won't believe the length she went to. I was just trying to do the right thing, to help her out, and this is what she did. I knew I had her hooked. I was about to tell her the most unbelievable story of my life, a story about a mother's betrayal, a daughter's greed, and a very ugly, cheap plastic dresser that was at the center of it all. The truth is even uglier than I imagined. She's trying to bankrupt me and have me declared a non-person. But she made one critical mistake. She showed me her hand, and now I'm going to use it against her. Do you think I'll be able to prove my daughter's lies and get my things back? What if the truth is even more horrifying than I know? Stay tuned to see how I expose her twisted scheme and show everyone who she really is.
Helen was a rock. After I poured out the entire sordid, unbelievable tale of the fake furniture, the stolen money, the fraudulent power of attorney letter, and Jessica's cruel attempt to have me declared incompetent, she listened without a single interruption. There was no pity in her eyes, only a cold, hard, unblinking pragmatism that was more comforting than any words could have been. She was a woman who had seen it all, a retired legal aide who had spent her life navigating the messy, complicated world of family law. When I finally finished, my voice raw and hoarse, there was a long, heavy pause. The silence in the room was thick with unspoken truths and the weight of her quiet contemplation. "Well, Marta," she finally said, her voice a low hum, as calm and steady as a ship's anchor in a raging storm, "you've got a problem. A big one. She's not just trying to steal your money, she's trying to erase you, to legally declare you a non-person. She wants to own you, financially and legally." My heart seized in my chest. She had put into words the very fear that had been gnawing at my insides. "But," she continued, her voice dropping to a low conspiratorial whisper, "she made one critical mistake. She showed you her hand, and now we're going to use it against her." Helen told me that we needed to gather evidence. We couldn't just march into a lawyer's office with my unbelievable story and my righteous anger. We needed proof. Cold, hard, undeniable proof of her betrayal. "First, we need to find your furniture," Helen said. Her tone is sharp and clear as a bell. "She can't just make it disappear. It's too big, too valuable. And second, we need to prove she received your money and what she spent it on." Finding the furniture seemed like a lost cause. She had used a van I didn't recognize, and she could have sold it to anyone, anywhere. The cosmetic surgery clinic was a dead end. We knew the money had been spent there, but without a paper trail, it was all hearsay. I felt a wave of despair wash over me. It felt like trying to find a needle in a haystack, a futile, impossible task. But then Helen, in her infinite wisdom and pragmatic brilliance, had a better idea. "You said you gave her a check, right?" she asked. I nodded. "Well, checks have a paper trail. We can get a copy of the check from your bank, and then we can get a copy of her bank statement. It might take a subpoena, but we can do it. The paper trail will tell us exactly where that money went, and if we can prove she spent it on herself and not on a home extension, it will be all the proof we need to expose her lies." A small, fragile beacon of hope flickered in the dark, empty sea of despair. A plan was taking shape, a small but powerful act of defiance. The next few days were a blur of frantic activity and endless paperwork. Helen had me fill out forms, sign affidavits, and write down every single detail I could remember about the van, the men, the conversation with the receptionist, and every single piece of furniture she had taken. We even got a search warrant for Jessica's bank records, a process that felt both thrilling and terrifying. I was actively fighting against my own daughter. It was an unnatural, heartbreaking feeling, but it was also empowering. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a protagonist in my own story. One afternoon, as I was going through my old bills, a tiny, insignificant detail caught my eye. A receipt for a small, local storage unit. I had rented it years ago to store some of my late husband's old fishing gear, a task he had always meant to do himself but never got around to. I had completely forgotten about it. But a few months ago, Jessica had asked for the key, claiming she needed to store some of her old college textbooks. I hadn't thought anything of it. It had seemed like such a small, harmless request. Until now, my heart began to pound in my chest, a cold, hard drumbeat of dread. Could it be? Was it possible she had used my own storage unit to hide my stolen things? I drove to the storage facility, my hands trembling on the wheel, my mind a jumble of hope and fear. The place was a desolate, grimy maze of steel doors and fluorescent lights, a place where people hid their forgotten lives. I found my unit, unlocked the rusty padlock, and pushed the heavy steel door open. The air inside was thick with the smell of dust and old memories. And then I saw it. My heart leapt into my throat. The unit was full of my furniture, every single piece of it, from my grandmother's bookshelf to the Persian rug and the grandfather clock. My heirlooms, my memories were all there, stacked like pieces of a Jenga tower. She hadn't sold them, she had stolen them and locked them away, probably for a rainy day.
Maybe she planned to sell them later, or maybe she planned to use them against me in some other twisted game. The relief, the overwhelming of it was almost enough for me to faint. But the relief was quickly replaced by a cold, hard rage. So this was her plan. She had taken my things, filled my house with worthless junk, and was now trying to take my life and my money. I felt a fierce, burning desire for revenge. I knew now that she was not just greedy, she was a complete psychopath, and she had to be stopped. I called Helen, my voice trembling with a mix of triumph and fury. "I found them," I said, the words a breathless whisper. "All of them. They're in a storage unit, and I have the key." My heart, which a moment ago had been a cold, hard stone, was now a roaring, defiant fire. The game was on. I was a fighter, not a victim, and I was going to win.
The next day, Helen and I went to the bank. With a court order, we were able to get a copy of the check I had written and a full, detailed breakdown of Jessica's bank account activity for the past 2 months. What we found was a sickening testament to her greed. The $50,000 was gone, every single penny of it. It had been spent on plastic surgery, designer clothes from the expensive boutique I had remembered, and a new car she had been showing off to her friends. There were also payments to a shady company that had done her home makeover and a few other suspicious transactions that were a testament to her greed. The paper trail was as clear as a cloudless day. She had used my money to finance her vanity and her lies. Helen smiled, a cold, predatory smile that was a perfect reflection of my own feelings. "We have her," she said, her voice a low hum. "We have the check, we have the records, we have the evidence of the theft, and we have the motive. We can prove that she's a liar and a thief and that she's been trying to take advantage of you. She's gonna go to jail, Martha, for a very long time." The words felt like a shot of adrenaline to my system. A fierce, burning joy surged through my veins. The game was almost over, and I was going to win. We sent a letter to Jessica's lawyers, a polite, professional document that was so loaded with legal jargon and undeniable evidence that it was a legal bombshell. It outlined the evidence we had, the check I had written, the bank records showing she had spent the money on herself, and the fact that we had found my furniture in the storage unit. It was a masterpiece of controlled rage and professional vindication. It was a formal notice that the game was over and that her lies were about to be exposed for the entire world to see. The next morning, my phone rang. It was Jessica. I didn't answer. She called again and again. She left a voicemail, her voice sounding frantic and desperate. "Mom, pick up. Where are you? I need to talk to you." She called again, and this time I picked up. Her voice was a shaky whisper. "Mom, I need to talk to you. I'm so sorry." I didn't say a word. I just let her talk. And she did. She babbled, a stream of pathetic excuses and tearful apologies. "It was all Mark's idea," she said. "He told me to do it. He said you were a burden and that you were getting too old to take care of yourself." My heart sank. Mark was not as innocent as he had claimed. He was in on it all along. He had lied to me, to my face. The betrayal was so deep, so profound, it was almost comical. "You lied to me, Jessica," I said, my voice as cold and hard as a slab of marble. "You tried to take everything from me, my memories, my home, my dignity. You tried to make me an invalid. You used my love against me." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Mom, please," she sobbed. "I'll give it all back. The money, the furniture, anything you want." The words were an empty promise. I had heard them 1,000 times before. "No, Jessica, it's too late for that. The game is over." I hung up. My phone rang again. It was her lawyer this time. "Ma'am," he said, his voice clipped and professional, "we have received your letter. We are dropping all legal action against you. Your daughter has agreed to pay back all of your money, and we are working on a plan to get your furniture back, but you need to sign a non-disclosure agreement. You can't tell anyone about this." I almost laughed. My dignity, my memories, my home, they were trying to buy them back with a piece of paper. The thought of it was a searing indictment of their character. I hung up the phone without another word.
The climax was here. The game was almost over, and I was going to win. This is the moment everything changes. The truth is finally revealed, and the people who were supposed to protect me are exposed as monsters. What happens when I refuse to back down and demand more than just my money? Can I truly forgive the people who betrayed me so completely? Stay tuned for the final, shocking conclusion.
The day of the confrontation was as crisp and cold as my resolve. I had arranged a meeting with Jessica and her lawyer in their office, a sterile, soulless room with no personality whatsoever. The walls were a bland, uninspiring shade of gray. The furniture was a harsh, unforgiving black, and the air was thick with the scent of old paper and stale coffee. It was the perfect stage for the final act of this twisted play. I brought Helen with me. She was a silent, unblinking sentinel, a reminder that I was not alone in this fight, a stoic presence that radiated a quiet, unyielding power. She sat beside me, her hands clasped in her lap, her face a blank mask of professional neutrality. Jessica looked haggard. She was pale, her eyes were red-rimmed and bloodshot, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her perfect little world, the one she had so meticulously and cruelly constructed, was unraveling, and the sight of her was a potent cocktail of satisfaction and a strange, aching pity. I had come for justice, not for revenge, but a small vindictive part of me was rejoicing at her discomfort. "Mom," she said, her voice a pathetic whisper, "I'm so sorry." The words were an empty promise, a last-ditch effort to salvage what little dignity she had left. They were the same words she had used to con me, and now they had no meaning. I didn't say a word. I just looked at her, my face a blank mask, a mirror of her own fear. Her lawyer, a smarmy man with a slicked-back haircut and the smug expression, cleared his throat. He was a professional, a hired gun, and he saw me as nothing more than a problem to be solved, a nuisance to be dealt with. "Mrs. Miller," he said, his voice dripping with condescension, "we are prepared to offer you a settlement. Your daughter is willing to pay back all $50,000. We can arrange for a professional moving company to bring your furniture back to your home. All we need from you is a signed non-disclosure agreement and a promise to drop any and all legal action." He was trying to buy my silence, to sweep this entire ugly mess under the rug as if it had never happened. He was trying to make me a co-conspirator in my own humiliation. I leaned forward, my hands clasped in my lap, a small defiant gesture. "I'm not signing anything," I said, my voice as calm and steady as a lick on a windless day. The lawyer's eyes widened, and he shot a nervous glance at Jessica, who was now weeping openly. "Ma'am," he said, his voice a little more urgent, "this is a very generous offer. It's the best you're going to get. This is a very serious situation. You've gotten your money back. You've gotten your furniture back. What more could you possibly want?" "No," I said, my voice as sharp and cold as a shard of glass. It's not. It's not enough. I want more." Jessica gasped, a strangled, pathetic sound that was a perfect reflection of her desperation. "More?" she yelped. "What more could you possibly want from me?" She looked at me as if I had just asked her for her firstborn. I looked her dead in the eye, and for the first time in months, I felt a strange, satisfying sense of power. "I want a public apology," I said, my voice a low, dangerous whisper. "I want you to admit to everyone you know that you tried to steal from me. I want you to tell your children what you did. I want you to go to therapy and get help, and I want you to pay for it all. I want you to stand in front of your friends, your family, your children, and tell them the truth, the whole, ugly, humiliating truth." Her jaw dropped. She was horrified, terrified, and I knew in that moment that I had hit her right where it hurt. Her vanity, her perfect, carefully curated image of a loving mother and a successful businesswoman was about to be shattered. The lawyer leaned forward, his face a mask of cold, professional disapproval. "This is not a reasonable request, Mrs. Miller," he said, his voice as hard as stone. "We are not going to agree to this. This is a private matter. We are not going to air our dirty laundry in public."
I smiled, a cold, humorless expression that didn't reach my eyes. Then we go to court, I said, my voice as calm as a summer breeze. And the whole world will hear my story. Your client's friends, your client's children, the media. Everyone will know what she did. And then she will have no friends, no business, and no reputation to protect. Your client is a thief and a liar, and I will not rest until everyone knows it. This is not about money. It's about justice. It's about a mother who was betrayed by her own daughter. Jessica started to cry, real tears this time, not the fake theatrical ones she had used to con me. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a desperate, naked plea. "Mom, please," she sobbed. "Don't do this to me. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." She reached for my hand. I pulled it away. I didn't want her touch. It felt dirty, tainted by her lies. "It's too late for that, Jessica. You had your chance. You made your choice. Now you have to live with the consequences." I had won, but the victory felt bittersweet. It was a victory, but it was also a tragedy. And I knew in that moment that I would never be able to forgive her.
The silence in the room was deafening, a thick, suffocating blanket that was a perfect reflection of the emotional and moral bankruptcy of the people on the other side of the table. Jessica was weeping openly now, her face a mess of tears and mascara, her body shaking with a profound, bone-deep terror. Her lawyer looked defeated. He knew he had lost. He had tried to play me for a fool, to intimidate me with legal jargon and the promise of a quick, painless solution. But he had underestimated my resolve. He had underestimated the power of a mother who had been pushed too far. I had nothing left to lose, and that made me more powerful than he could have ever imagined. I was a force of nature, a hurricane of righteous anger and justifiable fury, and I was going to leave a path of destruction in my wake. Finally, he spoke, his voice flat and devoid of any emotion. "Very well, Mrs. Miller," he said, his shoulders slumping in a gesture of utter defeat. "Your daughter will make a public apology. We will draft a letter for you to approve. She will also pay for all of your legal fees and for all of the therapy sessions you've requested. The money will be wired to your account by the end of the day. The furniture will be returned to you tomorrow. You win." He couldn't even bring himself to call her by her first name. He had been so sure of his victory, so confident in his ability to manipulate the situation, but he had lost everything. His client, his reputation, his dignity. He had been so focused on the money that he had forgotten the most important thing, morality. I stood up. I didn't look at Jessica. I didn't need to. I had gotten everything I wanted, my money, my furniture, and my dignity. But more importantly, I had gotten my revenge. I had stood up to the very people who had tried to destroy me. I had fought for myself. I had won. And the victory felt like a vindication, a final, definitive answer to the question of whether or not I was losing my mind. As I walked out of the office, I felt a strange sense of calm. The anger, the shame, the hurt, it was all gone. It had been replaced by a quiet, triumphant peace. I had faced my demons, and I had come out on top. And as I stepped out into the crisp autumn air, I knew that my life, the one I had built with love and hard work, was finally mine again. The furniture was just a small part of it. The real victory was the knowledge that I had stood up for myself, that I had fought for my dignity, and that I had won. I had my home back, my money back, and my dignity back. I had my life back. And it was all thanks to a very ugly, cheap, plastic dresser that exposed the true monster hiding in my own family.